being a man, how can you turn conflict into connection?
Welcome to The Growth Concept. I'm your host, Kieran Upton, where my mission is to empower growth through real conversations.
I realized, holy crap, I think there's a lot more men that might actually need these techniques to be the best version of themselves.
I'm joined by Duncan Forbes, a man on a mission to improve men's physical and mental health.
And it was probably the most eye-opening experience that I've ever witnessed.
And how men need to live stronger to their values, standards, and live a life with more integrity.
It wasn't just the amount of shame that these men were experiencing.
Whether you're a man wanting to step into your best self or a woman wanting to better understand the pressures, challenges, and strengths men face in this day and age, this conversation will give you these powerful perspectives. If you're ready for a real and thought-provoking discussion about values, identity, and personal evolution, let's get into it.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Duncan, what mission are you on in your life right now as we speak?
Right now, I'm trying to dive into men's health. Currently, I've been a personal trainer for about 13 years. I've been a frontline team member. I've been in leadership. I've been a nutritionist. I've been now studying to become a Pilates instructor. But the longer I am in the health field, the more that I'm realizing that there is sort of a need for men's programs. So that's what I'm starting to dive myself into.
The need for men's programs. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I think this day, especially at my life, there are a lot of questions that are arising to what it means to be a man these days.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's kind of, and I didn't even think about like this too until there were events in my life where I realized that I needed to step it up in terms of self-leadership. You know, it was awesome to be a leader for my team, but I really wanted to be a leader for myself too. And I've actually never been tested to be a leader for myself until it came to certain relationships with my family, relationships with, a significant other. And leadership can mean so many different things to so many different people. But as I continue with the preventative care, in terms of the physical capacity, I am starting to notice that not many men are asking for help when it comes to even just a simple strength training or just professional help from a personal trainer. I've been working at this company called Lifetime. It's an amazing company, and it's been around for over 25 years. We do a bunch of programs at Lifetime where like a 60-day, 90-day program, and just the most recent one that I participated in, there was only like 100 people that participated in, about like 75 people that participated in the program. It's a very small club that we work at.
Right.
And apparently there was only 30% of men that were asking to be a part of it, and the rest, and the 70% were women. And
with that point, was there particular characteristics in the males that asked and showed up compared to the ones that didn't? I just want to break that down quickly.
Yeah, very. So from my own personal experience, it definitely does seem like in the area that I'm at, it's more of a suburban area. There's stay-at-home moms that definitely take care of the children, and there's a lot of men that just like go into the city or spend more time, providing. But what I'm starting to realize too is that the place that I'm working at, there's a lot more community for the women than there is for the men. And not whether it's not like a bad thing or not, right? I'm starting to notice too that when it comes for asking for help, it's a very different I would say language for men to ask for help than it is for women at the end of the day. And through the past year and a half, I've actually kind of really deep dived into these men's programs because I was very curious as into, okay, what's going on? What's missing? How in my consultations with men can I get men to not be manipulated, but to be persuaded to feel free and comfortable asking for help from a personal trainer? So most of the information that I'm going to give you is from a previous experience, but also from a program ran by Connor Beaton, Man Talks. And, last October, I went to this men's retreat, and I've never been to a men's retreat before. And for any listeners on your podcast, what is a men's retreat? Do people just sit around and just talk about like emotions and everything like that?
Or
I
have a
will tell you
beer.
that this, yeah, or have a beer. I will tell you that when there was no drinking, which was very interesting. We had our own chef that cooked very holistic, healthy foods. But I would say that it was probably the most intense 4-day weekend that I've actually ever been in before. I went to
Right.
this men's program not really expecting much, but I was going for preventative care because a personal trainer in the healthcare system is part of the preventative care system.
Yeah.
And that's more of the physical aspect. But how can I coach not only other men, but myself to be preventative when it comes to building emotional and relational intelligence when you deal with a significant other that you truly care about? So I was going to this program because of a last relationship that really challenged me in many ways. And I wish I had the right support system to learn from my mistakes in real life rather than wait until the end. And even though my
Mm.
friends were great at supporting me too, they were always biased at the end of the day. They didn't really help me
Right.
see from the other side. And biased meaning like they want the best for you. So,
Yeah.
they always are kind of rooting for you. And there were definitely some friends that gave me outside perspective and some friends that didn't. But, I obviously men should go to therapy at the same time. I
Mm.
currently have a therapist. I think it is more important than for men to have a therapist, but I also think it's more important than ever for men to find a support group. So, in this retreat, it was probably the most intense 4 days of my life because out of the 30 men that were there, between the ages of, I would say, 28 to 60, me and one other
Wow.
person was only there for preventative care, while the other 28 men were there because they were about to get a divorce, they were going through their divorce or recovering from a divorce, or they were dealing with a lot of emotional and mental trauma from their significant other or from a family member. So
What do you
I
mean
would
by
say,
preventative care? Sorry.
yeah. So when I say preventative care, a lot of men ask for help when they get in trouble or they're digging
Yeah.
themselves into a hole. But why not find programs or a certain role model or, a type of friend that can help lead and guide you when it comes to having
Mm.
tough conversations with somebody that you like truly care about too. And the more research that I do, with Esther Perel, uh, with Lewis Howes, with a lot of dating coaches, it definitely seems like relationships are harder than ever to maintain, more than
Mm.
ever, right? But I don't know if there is even a gender war that's actually happening in the Western culture in the U.S. Some people there say that there is. Maybe New York City is really its own bubble itself, but across the country, it definitely seems like the idea of dating is actually becoming a lot more difficult and not even like worthy for apparently women to be a part of. So there's
Yeah. Interesting you bring that up because as I've gotten older and spoken to different people, it's something that is shifting drastically. Like the dating dynamics, family dynamics, like I've said in the podcast before, that obviously our grandparents, for example, they were very traditional. Our parents, they're still somewhat traditional, maybe easing into it. And then, boom, our generation, the script has completely flipped somewhat.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
that can be good or bad. But
mm-hmm,
I feel the changes happen so quickly, there hasn't been enough research or adjustment needed for the males and females to really reground themselves with the values that they're
mm,
going into that relationship, which I think's really interesting. And just observing that. Obviously, you were saying that you struggled in your relationship. What
mm-hmm,
part of it did you struggle with? Was it being a man, not knowing how to show up as a man, or was
mm-hmm.
it something completely different?
Yeah, great question. I think, for the most part, you know, with all my previous relationships, I would say we would have similar values. But I think when it comes to coming close to someone, for me personally, there was a lot of self-sabotage in it. And it was something that I didn't even realize I was like self-sabotaging, no matter how much like love that I provided to. There's definitely like a bunch of relationships that taught me about like lust and passion, and the other, I guess, previous relationships was really taught me about companionship and depth, right? And that is something that's kind of very hard for a man to comprehend at the end of the day. Because when we're looking for significant others, are they going to be either a love story or a life story? And, at the end of the day, I would say too, there's a lot of, as Americans, there's all these problems now that into what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a female? What does it mean to be a supportive partner and so forth? And there's all these problems that Americans are trying to solve. But because humans are that complex, all these problems can't technically be solved, but they're only just paradoxes that we should just manage. And we need to manage that not only through communication, but we should manage that through comprehension. We all talk about how communication is so important, but if the other person's not listening and taking into account that other person's need, the comprehension part, it's just going to go back and forth into an argument rather than just a discussion itself. And when these issues are arising, I have noticed over a period of time with my clientele and with all these podcasts, Call Her Daddy, Diary of a CEO, I will give it to women that they have better emotional and relational intelligence than most men do. And it's because
100%.
they've had more support systems for much longer and have been talking more about ideas on like their needs with other women and so forth like that. It's only just until recently that I'm starting to see that there's also these men programs that are starting to rise too. I will tell your listeners that, as these men's programs arise, men should kind of be careful about which men's programs that they get a part of, because it's not the idea of just taking their power back. A male and a female will always have power in the relationship. It's just the potency that you have with that power, because each significant other in a relationship has strengths and weaknesses that the other person should be able to offset and complement at the same time.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of men that, think about, the power struggle, like I'm not necessarily being a provider, which is another new thing these days, because women do have access to more resources, to more jobs, and to higher pay than ever before. So if a female can currently take care of themselves, right, then what does it mean to really, have a significant other than a man that can just provide a roof over their head? It's very interesting because, there are some people that say that the feminism movement has not done a good job at all for our culture. There's 3 different parts of the feminism movement too, which a lot of people don't realize. But what I would say is this about that feminism movement. It provided a community for all women to discuss more about problems, but how to solve these problems, and it promoted independency. Now, whether that's good or bad, that we'll only be able to figure that out over a period of time. But what that does mean is that what men need to bring to the table now these days is not just the materialistic, the house, the money, the safety, but what we should start providing, which is what women always have provided, the wisdom of how to grow with that significant other over a period of time through a longer duration of what a marriage technically should be. Because that person, each person in the marriage will be totally different 10 years from then, 20 years, and 30 years. And each stages of life actually require different needs for the individual and for the other family itself too. So going back to the men's retreat, it was astonishing to see how many men were in pain and had so much shame on themselves. They actually felt that they were shame itself. And there is a difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is where it's kind of a part of them, but that can easily be overcome over certain periods of time or practices. Shame is the person. Shame is the identity. So there was a lot of techniques and practices during this comprehensive 4-day program that I realized that, holy crap, I think there's a lot more men, not only just in New York, but the rest of the US, that might actually need these techniques to be the best version of themselves so they can give the best version of themselves to their significant other, to their families, to their jobs, and so forth like that. And it was probably the most eye-opening experience that I've ever witnessed, because it wasn't just the amount of shame that these men were experiencing, but at the end of the trip, it was actually the amount of grace that was given back to them, that literally gave them life back to make the right decisions for when they left the program.
This retreat, what exactly did they do so different to make you realize that, like, to visually see and have this massive shift you had? Like, because obviously there's heaps of communities like run clubs, gym communities, but this retreat in particular absolutely changed your perspective, it seems, on mental health and men's values, becoming a man. Like, what have they done differently, do you reckon?
To your listeners, what I can tell you is that, like, I guess the annoying thing that most women say is that, like, why does my husband not open to me, right? Why doesn't my husband not communicate with me their needs and so forth? It's because when it comes to emotions, men are not emotionless. They just don't know the language of emotions that women do. For example, when it comes to just like a simple argument, men will be mostly, I did that for you, I did this, and I did that. Why don't I get this back? What women do a great job is that, when you did this, I felt this way. So what that technically means is that men do a great job explaining a problem. Women do a great job expressing a problem. So in terms of understanding better how to communicate with another, that was part of the program and the point of the program. But what Connor Bean and his team did for the rest of the entire, crew was make a safe place for these men to trust each other and to literally let a bunch of layers and walls deconstruct and open up, so everybody could actually see and feel each other's shame and guilt. Because there is another saying that says, grief not witnessed is not processed. So when a man starts showing his grief in front of other men that he can trust, the process for them to get to the other side becomes a lot faster and quicker. And it also feels a lot safer too. This sounds very familiar with a lot of like women's retreats when they go on yoga retreats and so forth like that.
Yeah.
We did do exercises. We did do movement stuff in the morning. We actually did a lot of breathing techniques too. There's actually different types of breaths where you can relax a man into a certain state, but there are some men in the program where they're not open enough, that there's certain breathing patterns which actually gets them excited to express and to get them out of their comfort zone, which is a very interesting tactic as well.
Yeah, right.
But what they definitely used was a lot of Carl Jung work, shadow work, that was able to have men kind of learn about their archetypes that they have in themselves that's holding them back from taking the next step into being a better communicator, and understand whatever sabotage that they're doing, which architecture is actually taking over from that.
Interesting. Interesting that you brought up the whole breathing technique, because at the moment I'm reading the book, The Way of the Superior Man. Have you read that book before?
I have not, nope.
Definitely recommend. It's very different, especially with everything going on in this society in the Western world. It's real different. It's deep, especially in the breathing and understanding the emotional and relation connection between males and females, and the way you breathe can change like your intimacy in your relationship. I did not know that like even that had a difference. Like, it's all these techniques which I wasn't aware of. But with your experience at this retreat, did the breathing techniques have a massive impact on you, and even to this day?
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Because I've been in the fitness industry for a while, these breathing techniques were familiar, but to these other men that, probably admitted that they haven't been to a gym in like years, because they were too busy taking care of their own family and not even themselves. These breathing patterns really did change everything. So when it comes to certain retreats for men to kind of start learning how to express themselves, it could be breathing, it could be yoga, it could just be movement itself. But the most important thing is getting yourself or your friend who's a man or whoever to just be there at the end of the day. Because the purpose of this men's retreat that I went to was actually going through something called an initiation phase. Now, this initiation phase was probably the most eye-opening thing because it was helping me personally and every other man understand what it means to become a man. Because throughout our childhoods, especially, I would even say mine, I don't even think I ever actually had the enlightenment day where I was like, wow, I am no longer a teenager. I am actually at the next phase of my life. And the idea of like this initiation phase has been, around for centuries with all different types of communities, even way before our time, and these can actually be different communities with like the Native Americans going into these caves, taking a boy from the community, taking them out into the wilderness, into a very dangerous area. It could also be in like, the mountains, or it could also be in caves that, it's very dim and narrow. But the image of a boy would die when that boy would come back into the community, and the image of a man would arise. If you think about it right now, especially in the Western culture, that type of initiation doesn't really happen anymore. And the reason why it was so interesting to understand was because this makes sense why there's a lot of women out there that are like, I feel like I'm dating a boy, or I feel like I am married to a child, right? And it does make sense, and as we grow up as men in this day, in this era, there are a lot of factors that's holding us back from realizing we are at that next step in our lives, but in that next step of our responsibility. There is a lot of absent fathers these days.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fathers that are actually not even present. They're there, but not technically present through the growth of a boy. And if you actually think about it these days too, there's not a lot of male archetypes that would actually be a good model, for these boys that are watching TV these days. I think I haven't even realized, but when I was watching like The Simpsons, Homer Simpson, that male archetype was kind of like a goofy type of guy, and Peter Griffin and all of those others. Like if we truly think about it, I think the male archetypes is just getting a lot more limited than we're realizing. It's not really, and there's a lot of great female archetypes that are arising these days too, especially with the Marvel movies, which is great, which is also empowering too. But at the same time, there's a lot of things that are starting to happen to men these days, which a lot of women don't even realize. A lot more men are more likely to drop out of high school. A lot more men are more likely to be in jail, incarceration. There's a lot more men that are falling off the social part of our society when we really should be stepping up to the plate. So there's always Yep.
Interesting you bring up that like conversion process. You're 100% right. There's no moment that you're like, okay, I'm now an independent, value-driven young man. But you were saying yourself as well, like you didn't have that line, that definition moment. But looking back at your own life, what do you think that moment was? Was it this retreat as such, or was it another key moment in maybe your past relationship?
I think it was a mix between a couple of things that just happens over a period of time. There was a time way back in the day where I got demoted from my job. So in terms of dealing with the rejection, luckily at that time I was listening to a lot of growth podcasts. I was, reading a lot of books, Mel Robbins, I would, Mark Manson, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah.
And all of these books that actually, were preparing me for these events of rejection. And there were definitely a few relationships that really knocked me right over upside down, and also for me too, like I'm adopted, so as
No
a man
way.
who is adopted,
Wow.
as a man who's adopted, there's always going to be something in your head that's talking about or asking about worthiness at the end of the day, so in terms of like sometimes when I get into certain relationships, and if it doesn't work out, sometimes I take it a little bit more personal than I should be taking it, but it's only
Mm.
just like a part of life too. But my parents are amazing. They gave me all the unconditional love that I ever needed. But for someone that is adopted, they'll always have those questions too. And there's a lot of studies that show too that someone that is adopted will probably self-sabotage certain relationships because they might not feel worthy enough if it actually becomes too good.
And that's what you were
So it
saying with
really,
your past relationship as well.
yep, exactly. So it was I've done a lot of work in terms of the physical uh, component in terms of the health industry, right? Trying to look good and feel good. But in terms of like the mental and emotional and even the spiritual aspect, that is a whole other galaxy that I'm starting to dive into right now too. And to warn all your listeners, like psychology is so interesting, but it's also like a black hole. It never ends. And there's all these like methodologies, IFS. I can't even, there's like so many, but it
Yeah.
is more important. It is more important than ever for men, I would say, to have two things. One, they should definitely be able to sit with a professional or a men's facilitator that runs a group to help them understand what's going on inside of them. But then the second thing that they need is they need a moral compass. And that could be following a certain religion or, having some type of uh, connection to something that's bigger than themselves, whether it's a universe or whether
Mm.
it is like God and so forth like that. Because the idea of initiation is to be whole again, right?
Yeah.
To be whole with the world. That is like the idea of it. And then to build worthiness. Because if it really is just all about me, 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 all about I, we're human beings that can fall any moment in time. And if we
Exactly.
don't, if we can't grasp that, right, and it would definitely, I would say, men these days need to have some type of moral code to guide them moving forward with certain values. So,
Mm. Interesting you bring up also your adoption
yeah.
side as well. Like I wouldn't have even picked like, but obviously that realizing that and going through your childhood, your teenhoods, knowing that you're adopted, how did that sit with you? Was it hard?
I would say like over a period of time, like I asked my parents when I was 7. I just remember being in the cafe and like, school. One of my friends was like, "Yo, you don't look like your parents." I was like, "Oh, okay. I wonder why." I asked my parents. My parents were like, "You're adopted," and I was like, "Oh." And
Wow.
I didn't really think about it like that. They said it in a much nicer tone, but just
Yeah.
to keep the story quickly, I would go back to my parents or go back to my friends and tell them that I was adopted, and my friends actually made a big deal out of it. So because they made a big deal out of it, they were just like, "Oh shoot, yo, you're adopted. That's big." So I didn't really think much of it because my parents gave me all the love that they could have given
Yeah.
me, right? But as I continued growing, I had more questions, right? Like why was I given up? Where and I guess long story short, at the age of 21 after college, I actually went to Colombia to go find my birth parents, and I found my birth mom, but I never found my birth dad. So I was adopted from a different country. Yeah, so that was like a wild experience too.
Wow.
So that can definitely kind of explain, especially for me in this case, like what does it mean to be like a man in this day, right? Does it mean to be present? Does it also mean to be grounded? Does it also mean to be a provider? Does it mean to be a protector and so forth? There's so many questions that I actually love asking, and I actually love seeing the type of answers that's given to me through other podcasters, through other therapists and so forth like that too. And you're right, this day of age has totally changed. Like the idea of technology has kind of at the same time has us all interconnected but alone at the same time too. There's more men that are admitting that they're falling in love with their artificial intelligence robots, or their assistants at home. And this is it's laughable, but it's also scary at the same time, because where is this disconnect that's happening between a male and a female too? And if that's happening with a grown man, I can only imagine what is happening what's happening with the kids that are younger these days too. And being in the personal training industry for over 13 years, the past 5-6 years, I am actually seeing a huge difference with how women and men really think of themselves, or I would say boys and girls think of themselves in the middle school and the high school ages at the same time.
Wow. So young.
The needs to be someone, to be expected to be like something is incredible, right? For a man to look like something is unbelievably incredible these days too. So this is why I think these men's programs are starting to become such a bigger thing and a good impact for some people, but it depends on what type of programs that you're trying to get into, because there are a lot of men that are upset about the power dynamic shifting. So it's very important to do your research and make sure that, when you go to men's programs, it's not about trying to only about taking the power back. It's what you do without that power. Because a man that goes through a journey of powerlessness will only understand what to do when they have that power in the first place.
Yeah, such a great point. Obviously, with your process growing up and when you were 21, meeting your real mum, or your blood-related mum, in that moment, what values or beliefs or visions were you trying? Belief systems were helping guide you through this? I'm assuming if I was in that situation, it'd be a difficult process to stay grounded.
Yeah, I think when my birth mom was hugging me, she was obviously hugging me 3 feet away from, I would say, my real mom that raised me, right? So as my birth mom was hugging me, the corner of my eye, I was looking at my birth mom and I was looking at my real mom, that was crying. So I would say it was a lot of confusion. The values didn't really come over a period of time, right? And what I did realize in the past couple of years is that for a man like me, it's not like I was afraid of commitment. I was afraid of rejection when it comes to relationships, because the divorce rate is obviously high, as we all know that. And the biggest rejection is divorce, from my point of view, right? So to not get divorced, I just don't need to get married. And if I don't need to get married, I don't need to be serious in relationships. So it was a pretty kind of unhealthy type of thought process too, but it was a defense mechanism for me to really understand, right, that, a man like me would just not want to commit to, because the idea of love, a lot of people don't realize, but the definition of love is giving another person the power to destroy you and then trusting them with it, right? Which a lot of people don't freaking understand. And everybody's afraid of grief. And not many people know, when does grief actually start? Grief doesn't start when you lose someone. Grief actually starts when you actually fall in love with someone else more than yourself.
Yeah.
So there's all of these points that it's very important for men of all ages to kind of start understanding too. There's definitely some anger emotions that sometimes arise for me when I think of my birth dad. I don't even know who my birth dad looks like. But one of the practices that actually happened at the men's retreat, I was the only one in the group that was adopted. And they did this crazy technique with me. They tried to get anger out of me to really start expressing like my internal like emotions.
Help me visualize
I
that.
will.
I'm like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
imagining like a
So,
little hut in the bush or something, and like a bunch of men just like
well,
be angry.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you this. I would just imagine 30 men in a circle, right? And they
Okay.
call me into the circle, and I am sitting in a chair in the middle of the circle, and then you have Connor sitting right in front of me, and then discussing how I am feeling, right? Or I want to say not how I'm feeling, what am I feeling? Because women do
Mm,
a great job expressing how they're feeling. Men, in terms of language, it really should be, what are you feeling right now? Are you feeling tingling? Are you feeling, anxiousness? Like, what are you feeling? Are your feet feeling like they want to run away? That is what men can actually do better at, when it comes to that emotional intelligence.
mm.
But with me, I was sitting in front of him, and I was just starting to do the best I can to explain how I was feeling. And then what Connor did was he actually had a couple of men stand up and start grabbing me, like in my arms. And he had another one of his coworkers be in front of me, and he wanted that person to pretend like he was my actual birth dad, right?
Wow.
So it was an experience that I did feel like helped. I don't think I really needed it because I felt like I was over that chapter. But what I
Mm.
did feel at the end of me trying to get like really angry and try to, like, I almost tried to hit the guy in front of me, right? Um, and obviously I didn't, but through all of it, the thing only lasted about 6 minutes, 5 or 6 minutes. But what was going through my head was, maybe this is why I play a lot of contact sports. This is probably why I loved playing rugby back in college, because I just loved getting myself hurt. And the reason why I loved getting myself hurt is because I deserve this. And did I deserve this because I was adopted and I'm not worthy of everything? It's definitely that type of complex thinking that, like,
Wow.
if you start really exploring it with like a professional, it's some really interesting stuff, right? But I just remember after me just getting exhausted trying to break through those people that were holding me back, they had me just stand straight up, close my eyes, cross my hands, and then they had another 8 people come up behind me and then lift me up and then just hold me, which was a pretty
Wow.
crazy experience. It was a lot of somatic therapy, a lot of somatic techniques at the same time too. A lot of Carl Jung shadow work, but a lot of somatic therapy. And somatic therapy is basically, where you have someone trying to touch certain parts of your body to release tension.
Mm.
But it was one of the crazy experiences that I hope not to necessarily replicate, but to at least be, the door for a lot of men to start getting into. And I'm first going to probably start that off in the New York, Westchester area. So I'm studying through my mentor, Connor Beaton, about all of this stuff. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I don't only just want to change relationships, I also want to save relationships, and I also want to save marriages, because I wish I had this done to me in the past too.
What I've gotten from that point is the depth of situations and events in your life. Like the thing you may not think is very big, or the thing that you went through, you may wouldn't have a big impact. But really, if you look at like the effect on that compounded over time, then that keeps coming up. And I think just based on your own experiences, like you address that, you move forward, and then you came out more aware. And to get through that stage is what I think the key points I've written down on what you've just said is to be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable, you got to have emotional intelligence. And to have
Hmm.
emotional intelligence, you got to be open.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that process is what the men these days are lacking, and that's going to obviously affect mental health, relationship dynamics, family dynamics, etc. And it's just
Hmm.
interesting to see that pan out in your life. With your approach to being a man, you were saying that values came later in your life.
Hmm.
Do you think this day and age it's important to actively seek out those values and live your life to those values to become a better man, or actively seek out the disciplines to be a typical good man, whatever that may be in this day and age. Like, you're actively practicing being a good man. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, when it comes to like having a moral code, like what are you living by? What are you guided by too? You know, and everybody should technically have standards. And when somebody has standards and they bring that into a relationship, they should only hold that other person to the standards that they can only hold themselves to. Right? So there's a lot of hypocrisy that comes into that, right? Everybody wants this. Everybody wants like a real relationship until they meet someone that is like a real person with real values, with real needs, you know, with real problems. So that's like the most important thing too. But in terms of like, what does it mean to be a man too? Like a lot of women these days, they want like a vulnerable man. But there's a difference with like being vulnerable, right? And understanding vulnerability. What I've noticed with, you know, the men that I am starting to train, mostly in just like personal training, but having discussions with them, the idea is to recognize when you're being vulnerable, but then let your significant other know what you're going to do with that vulnerability. Because at the same time, your significant other, they'll love you and look out for you, but at the same time, they don't want to be your therapist at the same time.
Exactly.
So that's why there's actually a lot of confusion that's happening. Like, all right, well, this woman wants me to be vulnerable. I just opened up and they freaked out and they like ran the other direction, right? So that is why a man should learn how to be grounded at the end of the day. Learn, recognize their emotions, whether it's sadness or anger. But then if they do have a significant other, express what's going on inside of their hearts and their heads, but then also let them know that they are going to find a solution for that. And that partner should be able to guide you through that too. And it's so interesting these days because a lot of women are just like, you know, is this person healed yet? Like, am I healed yet? I will be very careful when I say this, but at the end of the day, when everybody wants to be healed, it's like trying to go back in time and like when we were first born and we were in the most purest form of ourselves. Life will always taint us at every stage in our lives, and we're going to have battle scars. So when it comes to healing, it is a process and not a destination. But during that process, what significant other will help you walk through that process? What significant other will actually help you realize what your demons are, right? We all got issues that we're all dealing with. So whatever partner that you're looking for, choose a partner that's actually makes life a lot easier than it already like, it's already hard in the first place. So that's kind of like my 2 cents when it comes to being disciplined, but also like learning how to be vulnerable with like your significant other. And it also just like, it depends on so many other factors too. You know, I think questions are probably the biggest. It's not like, you know, what do you like to do for sports? It's like kind of what you asked me, like, when did you realize you actually became a man? I think at the end of the men's retreat, that's when I realized I'm at the next phase of my life. And I can't be doing what I'm doing if I want to be at this part of my life. 100%. So that entire 4-day program was my initiation phase to help me realize that like I'm actually a man with responsibilities, with needs, you know, and with standards that I need to hold myself to. And when any man realizes that, hopefully they should start learning that there is a difference between having tactics to get a certain woman or having character to represent to a certain woman. Because tactics is what people are starting to see on social media, like how to get the girl in 10 ways, right? What's 20 ways to like say on like a Hinge thing. And what that is that if you try a tactic and it doesn't work, you'll try another way, right? But a character is who you are and is the standard. And I think a lot of people are starting to lose the idea of authenticity. As the world becomes a lot more artificial, I think humans are becoming less relational at the same time. And another example for your audience, there is a lot more dating coaches that are starting to arise now because of the mass adoption of artificial intelligence and all these dating apps. because what is happening now is that there's a lot more artificial intelligence prompts that are being exposed to people setting up an account. So if you go onto an app and you select artificial intelligence prompts of what would be the best way, well, the person that you're matching with is also using artificial intelligence prompts too. And what a lot of people aren't realizing is that it's not authenticity that's getting you guys connected. It's the not just algorithms, but artificial intelligence that's
so
actually doing the
scary.
speaking for you. It is a very scary thing, and that's why it's important to understand these changes that's happening with society at the end of the day, right? So authenticity is going to be the most important thing more than ever when it comes to trying to build a connection. And the last thing that I'll probably say too, when it comes to like being a man, how can you turn conflict into connection? There is always going to be conflict in periods of time in a relationship and in a marriage. It is more than ever easy to come out of a relationship in a marriage, but it is harder than ever to stay in it. So that's probably what I would probably think about.
Duncan, wow, this conversation has been absolutely amazing. I love the depth we've gone into like becoming a man, and even like if you're a female, like listening to this as well, like you can understand your man more with this conversation, which I
Yeah.
think that's also half of the equation as well. Duncan, I got a couple last questions for you. If you
Sure,
could
man.
go back to your younger self, what would you tell yourself and why with the knowledge and wisdom you have now?
Oh, that is such a great question. I wouldn't want to change time, right, at the end of the day. But I would say um, enjoy enjoy the moments with the people that you love. Because you never know when it's going to be the last time that you're going to see that person. There's been a couple of deaths from friends that I've been close friends with over the years, and it's definitely affected not just me, but a lot of other people that I knew personally at the same time. So just doing better at enjoying the moment. And I would also just say to myself too, like if you truly care about someone, don't play games. Be more honest with yourself and honest with others. So
And that's just touched my heart. That I
yeah.
feel like that's like a podcast in itself. But what key moment was that for you? Like obviously losing a friend, that is no easy game. It's terrible. But was that the key moment that made you realize I gotta like you never know when the imaginary clock on your head's going to go?
Yeah, I lost one to testicular cancer, and I lost another buddy to drugs.
Wow.
But the one that I lost to testicular cancer, I met him through my job. And when I got demoted, he was the one that was like, do you want to go to Greece with me? And I was 25, 26. And I've never traveled outside of the US before. And he wanted to travel because he got dumped by his ex girlfriend. And it was because of him that I started to realize I had the travel bug inside of me. But when I saw the world with him, when I saw Greece, I was talking to people from Australia, but I realized that my problems were small again. And I was becoming whole again because I was meeting other people from different parts of the world that have a different viewpoint. So if it wasn't for him, I would have never went to Greece and actually realized, how beautiful the world is, and almost had a thought process like Anthony Bourdain. Vacations are not just for you to enjoy life. It's actually a part of education for life.
Yeah. I absolutely love that point. The last guest I interviewed on the Growth Concept podcast left a question for you, not knowing who you are, what business you're in, or what story you tell. The question is, what is one piece of entertainment that has impacted you? It could be a show, book, movie. And how has that impacted your life today?
So one piece of entertainment. Ah, man. I would say, I mean, there's definitely like a couple of movies at the end of the day. Uh, Christopher Nolan is one of my favorite directors. I would say the
Right.
movie either Inception or the movie The Matrix. That kind of really
Nice.
is like, is this all real, right? But the movie Inception too. And I would just say those movies really helped me, especially The Matrix. I would say, like, what does it mean to have a free mind?
Yeah, it's pretty
You
deep
know,
movie.
what
Yeah.
what does it mean like to like break free from like society too? And society's very important, but like what does it mean to be your own character in society, and what can you give to society?
Duncan, what question do you want to leave for the next guest, not knowing what business they're in or what story they tell?
I would tell them, when did you realize that you were at the next phase in your life? What was one key moment where you realized that you are no longer a girl anymore, or you are no longer a boy anymore?
I love that question. Thank you so much, Duncan Forbes. This conversation has truly hit my heart and hit home, and I truly hope the listeners I'm sure they have gotten at least one thing from it. All your links and resources will be in the show notes below. Duncan, thank you.
Perfect. Awesome. Pleasure. Thank you.